Sir, I'll start with you first. Please pay particular attention to the public comment instructions as they have changed slightly for recent meetings. To enable public participation, we will receive public comment from each item on today's agenda. Each speaker will be allowed up to 3 minutes unless otherwise abbreviated by the chair. When you have 30 seconds remaining, I will indicate that your time is almost up by ringing this bell. When your allotted time is reached, we will announce that your time is up and ask the next person in the queue to speak. We will take public comment from those joining us in person first, and then open up the remote access lines for those joining in. For those calling in to submit their testimony, please call 1-415-655-0001, then enter the access code 2488-735-7187. Just wait for the item you were interested in speaking to. Comment, you must enter *3 to raise your hand. Once you've raised your hand, you'll hear a prompt, raise your hand to ask a question. Please wait to speak until the host calls on you. You will receive a request to unmute when it is your turn to comment. Press *6 to unmute and begin your public comment. Best practices are to call from a quiet location and to please mute the computer. Once your time has elapsed, your line will be muted. Those persons attending in person, please line up into the committee. When the public comment for your item you would like to speak to is called, please speak clearly and slowly, and if you care to state your name for the record. Finally, I'll have to silence any mobile devices that may be during these proceedings. So I'm going to ask everyone who is speaking, please try to enunciate and project when you are speaking. Now, moving into roll call. Seat 1, Mohammed Mali, a representative from the Department of Public Health. Seat 2, Lieutenant Lang, representative from the San Francisco Police Department, also absent. Seat 3, Stephen Clark, a representative from the Department of Building Inspections. Seat is Pine. Matthew Chandler, or a representative from the Planning Department. Representative from the San Francisco Unified District is still unfilled. Ellen Rice, or a representative from the Entertainment Commission, Dylan is unfortunately sick today, so we won't be able to attend. Victor Long, a representative from the San Francisco Fire Department, is also fine. Seat 8, Chairperson Ali Jamali. Seat 9, Vice Chairperson Edmund Lewis. Seat 10 is currently unfilled. Seat 11, Paul Lawrence. Seat 12, Jakari Donaldson. Here. Seat 13, David and Douglas Valley. Present. Seat 14, Shay Gilmore. Seat 15 is also currently unfilled. And seat 16, Antoinette Moore. Great. With 7 members present, we have established a quorum. The San Francisco Cannabis Oversight Committee recognizes that we are on the unceded ancestral homeland of the Ramaytush Ohlone, who are the original inhabitants of the San Francisco Peninsula. As the indigenous stewards of this land and in accordance with their traditions, Ramaytush Ohlone have never ceded, lost, nor forgotten their responsibilities as the caretakers of this place, as well as for all peoples who reside in their traditional territory. As guests, we recognize that we benefit from living and working on their traditional homeland. We wish to pay our respects by acknowledging the ancestors, elders, and relatives of the Ramaytush community, and by affirming their sovereign rights as First Peoples. Thank you. This time, short thing. My apologies. I'm just again trying to make sure that the audio is picking up. Everything on our end. Me? Everything should be working. I'm going to move this a bit closer to y'all. All right, we're going to continue forward and see if these audio issues can be resolved. Anyone who'd like to make a public comment, please line up behind this table. For any members of the public attending in person, please line up behind the table to provide comment. For our remote viewers, please note that you have two options to provide this time. First option is to call in by phone. If you would like to use this option, please dial 1-415-655-0001, followed by this access code. 2488-735-7187. Then press *3 when prompted to do so. You may be muted if there are others in the queue before you. If so, please wait until you hear a prompt on your phone to vote. This is your indication that it is your turn to comment. Please press *6 to unmute and begin your public comment. Once your time has elapsed, you will be muted again. Option 2, you can submit your comments by chat. The chat box is open. Read your comments as they come. Looks like we have one person here who'd like feel free to step up to the podium. State your name for the record if you like.
Graham Goodwin, Director of San Francisco Primary Democrat. I'd like to mention to everyone that April 13th in San Francisco, we're going to have a meeting. And we want everybody to be involved. And the idea is outreach to help the retailer, the vendor, everyone. So if you go to www.ffweed.com, ffweed.com, you'll see the schedule. It was created by David Downs, the senior editor of lives in San Francisco. So I would really encourage, I'd love to see the oversight committee express this and ask people to I mentioned that Primary is one of the sponsors, also Sunset Connect is amazing. And we just want a lot of support, and I think one of the other pieces and get interviewed during something like me. It's actually they want to kind of things that they also try to spearhead. Tying into this, a report just came out that showed that statewide cannabis sales are down 10%. Another reason to have that because we have to create a bigger market in order for ones that are coming and to get in. So I would encourage everybody that love to hear the committee boards and love to hear from the I'm a good citizen. I'm gonna send my 20 seconds back.
Thank you very much for your public comments. Third person, I see no other attending in person, and I see no hands raised with their comments. Item number 8. I just remind the committee members, as they suggest comments and continue to speak throughout the meeting, please make sure you speak up from the microphone so we can get for the recording. Do you have any other adjustments to the agenda that I would like?
That we could open up for public comment and then.
Okay. For any members of the public attending in person, please line up behind this table to provide public comment. For our remote viewers, please note that you have 2 options to provide public comment at this time. First option is to call in by phone. If you would like to use this option, please dial 1-415-655-0001, followed by this access code 2488-735-7187. Again, that's 2488-735-7187. Then press *3 when prompted to do so. You may be muted if there are others in the queue before you. If so, please wait until you hear a prompt on your phone to unmute. This is your indication that it is your turn to comment. Please press *6 to unmute and then begin. Once your time has elapsed, you will be muted again. Option 2, you can submit your comments by chat. The chat box is open. I will read your comments as they come in. If you'd like to make a comment, please step up to the podium. State your name for the record if you like, and begin your.
Pretty good when the director. I'd like to note that many of you know SB 34 allows us to giving out free cannabis. It's due to sunset this summer, and it has been introduced. Really quick, something real quick. We down in AB 2555. AB 2555. So it's going to work its way through legislation. So obviously, please support it. Please send it to Canada, email or something to the local state senator. We're expecting that it'll go through the sign. Never guaranteed. It's so important. No other product give the way through.
Thank you very much for your public comment. Chairperson, I see no one else in person who would like to comment, and I see no hands raised.
Thank you. Portion of. Thank you.
On the vote to remove item number 8 from the agenda, Chairperson Ali Jamalian, how do you vote? Aye. Vice Chairperson Adam Hayes, how do you vote? Seat 10 is correct. Seat 11, Apollo Wallace, how do you vote? Aye. Seat 12, Kari Donaldson, how do you vote? Aye. Seat 13, David Amos Town. 14, Shea Gillenwood, how do you vote? Seat 15 is currently unfilled, and seat 16, Antoinette Mobley, how do you vote? With 7 ayes and 0 nays, motion passes, and agenda item number 8 will be removed for today's meeting. Very brief update on this item 2.
Review. If you take a minute to review, please. I'd like to mention here that reading these minutes, you know, related to events and temporary events of the state agenda. So they really identify the smaller events. It's something I'd like.
Any changes proposed? Yes, sir. For any members of the public attending in person, please line up behind this table to provide public comment. For our remote viewers, please note you have 2 options to provide public comment at this time. First option is to call in by phone. If you would like to use this option, please dial 1-415-655-0001, followed by this access code, 2488-735-7187, and then press *3 when prompted to do so. You may be muted if there are others in the queue before you. If so, please wait until you hear a prompt on your phone. This is your indication that it is your turn to comment. Please press *6 to unmute and begin your public comment. Once your time has elapsed, you will be muted again. Option 2, you can submit your comments by chat. The chat box is open, and I will read your comments as they come in. There, I see no hands raised online, and I see no indication from anyone in person that they would like to.
And it seems like we have no.
So,
Yes, sir. Motion to adopt the minutes as written. Chairperson Ali Jamalian, how do you vote? Vice Chairperson Adam Hayes, how do you vote? Seat 10 is currently unfilled. Seat 11, Paul Wallace, how do you vote? Aye. Seat 12, Kari Donaldson, how do you vote? Aye. Seat 13, David Amos Town, how do you vote? Aye. Seat 14, Shea Gilmore, how do you vote? Seat 15 is currently unfilled, and seat 16, Antoinette Mobley, how do you vote? With 7 ayes and 0 nays, we have accepted the minutes from this meeting.
I think 6 and it's 6, 7, and 8. Policy has a lot to update us on.
So quick, it's the alternatives. On the grant side, everyone hears so whenever they say truly respond to that, first step, second step is itself has been sent to everyone who submitted. Steps to ensure responsive and happening the state same this is responding. Speaking of no questions, they are active. And one that legislation has been inactive status. So what that means is when the status is inactive, it's the first time it also mentioned an inactive status as in the inactive status. This point is that inactive we don't anticipate that we will, but it has technically no much like the and with that,
I asked the enforcement for the mostly detail and across the supply chain.
it's primarily it's actually a good they have consistent receiving, we have
Right. We don't have a lot of illegal dispensaries.
pushing through.
But that can be.
Yes, sir. For any members of the public attending in person, please line up behind this table to provide public comments at this time. For our remote viewers, please note that you have two options to provide public comment. First option is to call in by phone. If you would like to use this option, please dial 1-415-655-0001, followed by this access code, 2488-735-7187. Then press *3 when prompted to do so. You may be muted if there are others in the queue before you. If so, please wait until you hear a prompt on your phone to unmute. This is your indication that it is your turn to comment. Please press *6 to unmute and begin your public comment. Once your time has elapsed, you will be muted again. Option 2, you can submit your comments by chat. The chat box is now open and I will read your comments as they come in. I'm seeing no indication from our in-person attendees that they would like to comment, and I am seeing no hands raised online.
Great, got it. Certainly. See these. Leave everything open.
This is another one of those fun meetings where we get to talk a lot and you won't get to listen. Yes, we will be. We will be talking about specific code sections, or at least some of the specific code sections. Others, if they like it, a specific code reference. But as you'll see as we get deeper into it, it's difficult to cite one code section specifically because it's really a mixture of different codes that apply that lead to some of these expirations as we're going to get into. So why don't we just dive right in? I'm sorry, I'm going to talk a little loud to try to make sure that the microphone can pick us up. Today we're going to be discussing legacy permits, which is kind of our in-office terminology for medical cannabis permits as well as temporary cannabis business permits. We refer to them as legacy permits because these are businesses that existed in the industry prior to the existence of the Office of Cannabis, and at least for the medical side, well, for all of those businesses prior to the passing of Article 16, as we'll discuss in a moment. Yep. So first we're going to talk about legacy permits. I'm going to give you a little bit of the history in San Francisco around the different pieces of legislation that we're discussing and why these expirations are approaching. We'll talk about the authorizations that give these businesses the authority to conduct cannabis business in the first place, and then we'll get into the actual legacy transition process. We'll talk about the expiration dates that are coming up. We'll talk about the legacy permitting process, in other words, the permitting process that we're using to work with medical cannabis dispensaries as well as temporary cannabis businesses to make sure that they can transition to Article 16. We're going to talk a little bit about shot clock imposition, and we're going to talk about next steps for operators in case any of them are watching or in the coming days and weeks. Just as an overall note, maybe as Chairperson Kamal mentioned at the beginning of the meeting, there are quite a bit of administrative items today. Part of the reason we wanted to go through this is not only to make sure that the public and the committee are well versed in these issues, but also just to make sure that we are hitting operators from every angle that we can with this information to make sure that there's nobody that falls through the cracks. So diving into legacy permits and a little bit of background information on legislation in San Francisco. So in 1996, right, California voters passed Prop 215. That's the Compassionate Use Act. So that's what specifically legalizes cannabis for medical purposes. And this is around when you might start seeing some medical cannabis dispensaries opening up in San Francisco or in the coming years after that. In 2005, though, that's when the city enacted Ordinance 275-05, which is what ultimately creates Article 33 of the Health Code. This is also known as the Medical Cannabis Act. So this is the legislation that enacted the local regulatory scheme for medical cannabis dispensaries, which to date is still seated under Article 33 of the Health Code. Subsequently, in 2015, Governor Brown signed the Medical Marijuana Regulation and Safety Act, the MMRSA, which established the state-level licensing and regulatory framework for cannabis, right, which these cannabis dispensaries would also have to then meet those criteria as well. Moving into 2016, California voters statewide passed Prop 64, which is called the Control, Regulate, and Tax Adult Use Marijuana Act, or the AUMA. And this is what legalized adult use cannabis and also created the state licensing and regulatory framework for adult use cannabis sales. So subsequent to that, in July of 2017, the city enacts Ordinance 168-117, which establishes the Office of Cannabis. And then in January of 2018, Article 16 of the San Francisco Police Code has been passed and now goes into effect. And so this essentially marks the transition date from Article 33 to Article 16 as the central code that is going to govern cannabis in the city and county of San Francisco. That said, there are still authorizations that exist under different parts of the code, like Article 33, that allow for certain businesses to conduct this business, namely medical cannabis dispensaries. So with the enactment of Article 16, right, there were multiple authorizations that were created for cannabis businesses. One of those is the verified equity applicant authorization, which is one that I'm sure many members are already very familiar with. But the two authorizations that we will be discussing today are medical cannabis dispensaries, which we refer to as NCDs, and temporary cannabis business permits, which the shorthand is TNPs. So these, like I said, represent legacy businesses that already existed before Article 16. Medical cannabis dispensaries were already operating, and so different code sections were amended in order to facilitate those businesses be able to engage in adult use sales, not just medical sales. Whereas temporary cannabis business permits, those were always seated under Article 16. So this created a pathway for legacy businesses, for previously unpermitted businesses to kind of step into the light, let's say, and to register with the city and let them know that they were conducting cannabis business. And these operators were then granted not only a temporary cannabis business permit to allow them to begin cannabis business, but they were also granted a pathway for a permanent application underneath of that temporary authorization. And I just want to harp on this final point here that we've already mentioned once or twice, that this took revising multiple relevant code sections. So Article 16 of the police code gets created. That's what governs most of cannabis now. But there were also portions of Article 33, which is mostly governed by the health, that governed medical cannabis dispensaries. The planning code needed to be adjusted in order to facilitate the different businesses that were all in the space. And we're going to talk about why these different code changes are now causing potential expirations that are coming. So, diving into the legacy transition process, we can start off by talking about the approaching expirations that we have for legacy permits. So, both NCDs and temps are facing similar deadlines that stem from slightly different sources. So, for medical cannabis dispensaries, when Article 16 was passed, these businesses were granted what's called a temporary cannabis retail use from the planning department, right? So this is from the planning department. This designates the kind of use that a specific parcel can be used for. And this was essentially granting these businesses the ability to sell adult use cannabis alongside of their medical cannabis from the planning perspective. Now, this land use was originally set to expire on January 1st of this year. So, right, we've already passed that expiration date. However, we were able to work with the planning department and the Office of Cannabis. We were able to work with the board of supervisors, and we got them to extend this date to December 31st of this year. So, a 1-year extension for that land use. Now, medical cannabis dispensaries also have the authorization to conduct adult use cannabis sales underneath of medical cannabis sales underneath of Article 33. And this will also expire on December 31st, 2020. So, because the retail use and their medical use will both expire on December 31st, 2024, even though they come from different code sections. What this essentially means is that medical cannabis dispensaries will not be able to conduct cannabis business after that date unless they transition to an Article 16. So in a very similar boat, temporary cannabis businesses are facing essentially the same thing, stemming from a slightly different source. Their authorization is fully vested under Article 16, but written into that code was an expiration for that authorization, and that expiration, as far as I'm aware, was always set to December 31st, 2024. It might be slightly, this could have been extended by the Board of Supervisors a couple of years ago, was it?
Yeah, happy to serve. Essentially, so that is why, and in conversation with the that is extend these days.
Thank you. And so, in a similar boat, these businesses will be unable to conduct cannabis business after December 31st, if they do not complete the transition process. So ultimately, every legacy operator is going to need to get an Article 16 permit if they want to continue conducting cannabis business. The Office of Cannabis has been working pretty diligently on this for some time, and we're going to go into those efforts on the next slide. But here we just wanted to highlight that we've also been working with our city partners in order to make sure that this process is as streamlined and as smooth as possible. So an example of this would be that we have already worked with the planning department and the Department of Building Inspections to kind of carve out this streamlined process for businesses that are not having any planning changes or any structural changes to their operation rate. So in other words, what that translates to is the business has already been in operation for some time. They did a lot of their build out, they did a lot of their inspections at a previous date. They will not need to jump through a lot of those hoops again in order to move through these departments. I also want to specifically note that this will not apply to every candidate. Definitely medical cannabis dispensaries went through a lot more, very similar process to what we have now when they were getting licensed. So they probably are less likely to encounter, let's say, Department of Building inspections, whereas temporary businesses, many of them didn't. So they might expect to have more inspections by DBA closer to what the standard process would be. It's going to be a little bit of a case by case, business by business, but we are working with these departments to make it as streamlined as possible. In addition to that, every single application that has been received by the Office of Cannabis has also been assigned to an analyst and is being actively processed. And so that leads us right into our notices and potential shot clocks. So all of the MCD and temp applicants have received extensive communications regarding these approaching deadlines and trying to get them to work with us on the transition process. Just to give you a little personal example, I'm not just a clerk for the COC, I'm an analyst in the Office of Cannabis. Some of these applicants, I've done outreach to them at least like 12 or 15 different times to try to get them to move their application forward. Obviously, with an application like that, that person is probably responsive and is not. We have more than saturated these folks with communications to make sure that they're aware that these deadlines are approaching. Yes.
What's the total?
Yeah, I want to say we're just off the cuff. I think we're looking at a pool somewhere total between temps and NCUs. We're looking at somewhere between like 70 businesses, I think.
It's
Closer to 70.
So there's a lot of the temps I probably won't. I mean, I'm not trying to speculate.
No,
I'm
yeah,
trying to
it
figure out
sounds.
if it's 24, December 24, how would I do
12 months or
Yeah,
10 months. 9 months remaining.
Yeah. Part of what we do is that let's still have the opportunity. So if they already, then that could be operating and will be outside of but there is now if that application is
I guess if you guys keep updated with every progress, let's say around fall, we would know if we would have asked the supervisors to extend work.
that's right. And
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
So we're doing this stuff.
And they're all very good.
Yeah, they want to.
There's also the difference between a lot of the times long and they want. There's also that with different interests.
And I think we can highlight one minor correction. Both temps and NCDs are able to point to limitations under specific circumstances. So anybody listening, take that with a grain of salt. Connect with your assigned analyst if you have questions about how to move. But it is technically possible for both NCDs and temps to move locations. Another nuance here that complicates the discussion around the specific numbers of businesses and specific numbers of applications is, right, in one category we have businesses that are already operating that we then need to transition to Article 16. There were both MCDs and temps that meet that criteria. In another category, we have businesses that either operated at some time in the past or for whatever reason, right, they might be what we refer to as a Fed or a PANCO. That's a business that was either closed down by the federal government or PANCO stands for previously existing non-operator. And usually they were closed by the police or by feds. And that universe is very small, but those folks do have an authorization to apply. And there are also MCD and temp authorization holders who don't currently have a store open, but they have that authorization to apply, right? So we're gonna have that authorization to open a business somewhere. So that's what makes it a little muddled. Like if we have between 70 and 80 temp and MCD apps combined, that could be 60 functioning businesses and 10 to 20 just like apps, right? But I don't have those numbers offhand.
So the shot clock data.
And the shot clock data we can have in previous to future meetings or harder numbers. Yes, so as Director Patel mentioned, MCD applicants started receiving communications back in November 2023, and I made communications just specifically about these expirations. So we had already been in communication with them about their transition. Subsequently, we sent shot clock notifications in early February to any parties that were particularly unresponsive or completely unresponsive on their applications. And then subsequent to that, we held virtual meetings with every single one of those applicants, at least the ones that were responsive to our request for a meeting, right? To make sure that they were informed of all these deadlines, they were informed of what items they needed to submit to move their application forward, and you know, they knew what their analyst was and things like that.
Not just to clarify, you said
Yes.
that is that's the distinction.
Yes, I guess to fully clarify, the completely unresponsive applications were really the only ones that didn't show up to the meetings that were scheduled, right? So these were people that we have not, some of them upwards of a year. So unresponsive temporary operators were also informed about these expirations in early February, and we will be distributing subsequent shot clock notifications in the near future, following the same process that we did for the medical dispensaries to temp operators. So we should have updates on that during future COC meetings. And as Director Patel mentioned, provided that applicants continue to work with us, right, this is not a tool that we are imposing to try to close out applications. This is a tool that we are imposing to undergird the seriousness of the approaching expiration dates and make sure that folks are aware that this is coming up. B, try to prompt people to be a little bit more responsive and make it very clear to them that if they are unresponsive, we will have to withdraw their application. And C, right, in those rare cases where someone is completely unresponsive and has been for some time, not only continue to document their responsiveness, but to use it to then clear that application out of the queue so that staff resources are not dedicated to pursuing an application that has no possibility. And so finally, before we get into any remaining Q&A, just for any operators that are listening or that end up watching, some information about next steps. Right? If you are currently operating a business that has an MCD or a temp permit, the first thing is please ensure that your contact information with the office is up to date. It's possible that some folks, their contact information is just out of date, and so they haven't been getting our contact, they haven't been getting our emails. So if you're listening to this, please make sure you reach out to us and update that, or just to make sure that we have the right information. Please check your inboxes and your voicemails regularly because we have been trying to email and call you. And please be responsive to your assigned OOC analyst once you've been able to make contact with the office. Failure to do any of these not only may result in a disruption to your cannabis business, but could result in a denial of your permit application, which would ultimately mean you would need to cease cannabis operations completely. And if you're unsure about the status of your application or whether the information presented today affects you, you need to update your contact information or any of those things, please reach out to us. The office email is officeofcannabis@sfgov.org. And our phone number is 628-652-0420. So we're going to go to the Q&A, but I'm just going to go ahead and leave the contact information on the screen and the operator next to us in case anyone is online watching. Do you have any questions from the seeing a lot of shaking heads, which is good. Actually, we're just sorry. Great. Yes, if you wouldn't mind holding your to for a question during your public comment. We are not unfortunately allowed to directly respond to questions presented during public comment, but at least we can put in the record and to talk through. Any questions from the community at this time? If not, we are going to prepare to move to the second part of this presentation, really the second presentation. I'm going to bring up my colleague, Ms. Evelyn Ramirez, to talk about NCD equity commitments. This is something that the committee has expressed interest in the past, so we have consolidated a bunch of information for you to understand how this process works and to get some top line numbers on what these equity commitments look like. This is not this is we can double check that the audio is still picking up.
Hi. Thank you so much for the opportunity to talk to you about this wonderful project. I manage this project. I'm pretty excited to show you the inquiry. So just to kind of get into it right away, the MCDs are there we go. So Ali was asking about code. Here's the code that governs the MCDs under Article 33, Section 33.22. And under this section, MCDs must demonstrate a good faith compliance with equity plans in order to renew their adult use authorization. The equity plans are submitted to our office, and we are reviewing them in collaboration with our partners at the at this point, the MCD plans are submitted every 180 days. And then once we review the materials, we make sure that they meet the criteria. The operators are required to submit COC for approval. During this review process to ensure that they meet the requirements listed in the following slide, but also to make sure that the equity plan to help foster more inclusive, equitable community, but it's not the intention to spring this up. So if the OC determines that it's too ambitious, too areas, or otherwise unfeasible based on the current market, we will provide suggestions to make it more. So to demonstrate good faith, an MCD must explain in writing and with documentation how it supported activities. One of them is our equity goals, equity for applicant business development, and a more equitable.
And just to clarify that, those are provisions that are taken directly from the section.
The provisions within it here that taking any form, station, job creating, purchasing of equity products, and equity applicants with equity. So this is the documentation. It must strictly specify who provides services, who receive those services, what goods and services are provided, what is the approximate financial value provided, when were they provided, do they correspond to the reporting period or are past? These commitments being carried through, like are you reporting them in every single report? They must correspond to the reporting period. And what was the objective of the activity? At this time, I would like to commend the operators or the MCD staff that put together this report. They're quite extensive and together. It takes me a while to review them. I very much appreciate your effort and diligence. Okay, so these reports are due 7 business. We will send out a couple. I will also provide a fillable PDF form for everyone. Once we review submitted plan, determine if the information is complete or if we need additional information. If it's not complete, I'll send an email. I'll ask after the meeting. So once it's accepted, we will refer to our partner page. We'll then issue the permission.
exchange. Is it?
Sure, at this point, because it's like the process of the last couple of years, operators with experienced compliance departments, meaning the same person that does the reports over and over and over, they know. So typically those exchanges are pretty, it may be like a one-off, like, hey, you can clarify this one item. So most of the time with those bigger operators, which have like dedicated staff that have not been located, they'll provide everything that we need. With the operations that have a higher turnover, this is sort of a nuanced process, that exchange goes back a little more. And then I'll follow up with anything to clarify any questions, or why are you asking? We did trust us. And it's not a matter of trusting, it's a matter of making sure that you're providing the right documentation so that you get credit for everything that you do. Is that? So in regarding enforcement, so if an operator does not comply with the legal requirements earlier, we would engage in particular operators are eligible for permanent extension. That permanent extension and CDs are listed as a business until it is completed and accepted by the COC. EPH may issue a fine based on sales from the operator period if they continue to operate. At least once in my opinion. That's not something we enjoy doing. And that's after acceptance. Not I wouldn't say acceptance, whereas it can to reach the operator by phone by phone. So our equity plans from our NCDs are presented to the city block equity goals. We gathered some data on the commitments and broke to the categories. One of them is the broader equity goals, and this is sort of a catch-all. We see that this is the other 5 technical assistance provisions, consulting, compassion programs, direct donations to community groups, equity hiring, and equity donations and purchases. So equity hiring is hiring folks to meet equity criteria. Equity donations and purchases could be carrying products by equity brands or providing equity operators with show space or demo space to advertise. I'm very proud to present to you the figures here. Totaling about this is just for this last year. Broader equity goals, that's all. I would probably say, like some operators, a lot of the operators sort of it could be giving your staff, let's say, 4 hours of paid employee time to go volunteer in organization. Usually they'll provide the operator some sort of that is and community organizations, technical assistance provision, like how often you sit with your mentee. We ask operators in the report to document the hours they spend and how they value time, and with a general description of what was.
How much of the equity donation purchases is purchases versus donations?
Not off the top of my head, we sort of put it together.
Yeah, and it starts to get a little complicated because form of an equity donation might be like providing free space to could be a type of a donation, right? It might not be just a cash in hand donation. I do think off the cuff, we can say that the bulk of that is equity, stocking equity inventory. But it's hard to we have to go back and fix those things.
Even if we assume that all of it is the inventory, that's $5,000 that expense we spending on it. The joke really sad. And the national stated donation and purchases. And now they're getting away with buying $5,000 worth of eggs on them. That's from a purchase budget.
Not sure where the.
But we have $2.7 million. What do you spend?
We don't, we have.
That's really far. I'm saying the goals that we identified are really fun. Yeah, that we could never feel that chance. 5 to 10. It's not even.
This is one.
But I think it's just,
I understand. I'm really just focusing on equity shelf space. Because that was a really big issue. Hours and hours. And if I would find people of the equity commitment rate, I don't think it's going back to the page. So, you guys just have a page where we did that. But if you they actually promise what they're doing. And while they might tell you, okay, we're not doing a lot of equity for doing hybrid, they should still be building.
I will just note some quick math here, right? We have about 24 operating MCDs. Those would be the only businesses required to just above 150 in various donations. Obviously, the bulk of that is those equity donations and purposes, but various equity commitments that they're making. Yes, about
That's still really small.
Yeah, but equity, that's just people.
And as we saw in our last breakdown, they're not the equity applicants aren't the ones that are higher equity applicants.
Yeah, slight difference would be, yeah, those are folks that, for example, like might have a status. You know, in or out. Yeah, but they might have gotten that status.
Yeah, I think we can do better if it's stuff. And I just from my perception of walking dispensary, a person a year ago. But all these have to do with, you know, dispensaries that have for the rest of your presentation shows that they are.
well, I think, yeah, sure. That recommendation, that was after a lot of these events. And Because they didn't necessarily an extra.
But you have companies, I read one that wasn't committing to provide any equity product, but was committing to. They shouldn't get away with buying. I'm not saying they should buy silk, but there's been a shrinkage.
In your opinion, what would
I think, I mean, it has a lot to do with sales velocity. Patient, but I think like the healthy client should do. That's not.
thank you so much. That's it.
So that's it.
That's all. So it's good.
So you would say you would like to, fair participant do that same random one for.
I don't think in general, it just, I know it's a small. Yeah, that would really jump. It's not a significant percentage of the actual 2.7 again split into donations and purchases. And I would. You know, I think that's what we have.
Should do this. It's like, I know, sales dollars is smaller. Sure.
What you do. And that's why I say you can't generalize. But just looking at that.
That are actually
Find a lot. Okay, there's a license that are operating that are not legal. But how many equity manufacturers?
Precisely,
That's what.
that's what Nick and Bernard was getting to is that, you know, we have around 50 equity operators in the city, total equity operators, right? Both of those are storefront retail. It's a really small.
So you don't know who actually has a white label contract with a non-equity company, but is an EBA.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that, which is that is just moving. Yeah, based on my experience, we've always been brands, and I think it more so comes down to things like how much volume do we do at the store, right? And also, there's been plenty of times when we'll pick up an equity brand and there's no kind of partnership or relationship. It's more, hey, equity brand is like here's our stuff, but also there's no real support in terms of us working together to move that product, right? We can only pick up a product so many times and it not move. And then we have to discount it and then we end up, right? So it's just not. Right, yeah, I'm not disagreeing with you at all, I do think that that percentage should be higher, right? But there's a lot of factors and numbers that tell the story about why a certain store may not have so much shelf space for equity brands, right? I do think that that market has constricted a lot, right? So the options that are available.
Produce.
Yes. Yeah, I wanna say it was probably upwards of 5 to 10 different equity brands, and that would do well, right? And we can consistently pick up on every other week or so, right? And it's just not like that anymore. There are maybe like 2 or 3 brands that we can actually consistently carry and keep stocked up because we know we have a symbiotic relationship where we don't get this product. And I'm actually just burning money. Right, we can actually then donate to a different organization or invest in something else, like properly training equity applicants that come from low government, right? So that's what we try to do, right? And we try to work with play within the market, but we do understand that there's complications that we need to fill, right? And our purposes, right? So yeah, I don't know. I
Typically need to fill out.
We do. Yeah, so we do too, right? We have a similar process, right? And where we need to prove what we've done over the last year that has gone into helping build our equity market, right? And so, we communicated back and forth on that before our best, but I don't know what other countries are doing.
That's what I'm getting at. It's not really saving. Some so what I'm doing is it's maybe so we can use the working here. I think we
50% is a lot.
It's
It's
a
a
way
lot, right? It also goes to these equity brands, how many equity brands do we have? How many do we have in flower, right? Because they're also right? What your store sells, right? You have one store that sells majority edibles versus flower, right? And we have another. That's going to dictate how. Yeah, so.
But the cost of doing them is always higher. That's kind of, I think, what I'm getting at. It was a really good goal. But the waste in commitment and might create.
Absolutely. Especially, I was just gonna come and say. Yeah, I mean,
I think we'll still have that money. I think that's the part of we always. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
That's what I do. If you make it off the.
What is that we've seen is
Incentivized, this will be elastic. I know.
well,
It will be.
Okay. Thank you.
Alright, Jennifer.
Yeah, I just want to say how it's so it's not like an Excel sheet that I'm taking here, right? But I pretty much give you some I've done, and then I can provide you with some documentation that proves that. So it's not like when the entities move to Article 16, it's not like they're not good anymore, right? They're still gonna
Yeah, they'll have to do. So in order, this number, because they gave me all of the invoices. So they have to provide invoices. If they do any sort of engagement with community groups, we need those receipts. So we do need evidence. This is like all evidence-based numbers. So
Gotcha. So it's a lot deeper for the entity.
and it's twice a year.
And to speak deeper to that, into that, it's pretty, she's being a little humble in the sense that now there's a lot of documentation that gets submitted for things that she ends up looking through in order to process these reports. And beyond that, right, this estimation is, I guess you could say this is like the lowest possible estimation that we can make because this is completely verified stuff that's submitted. And if they say something that's a little bit more nebulous or like we have a couple of times, but they don't have like a receipts for that or report that doesn't count with this number. So, this number is probably the low end of what they're committing. But that being said, I do just want to reiterate, right, that we're looking at like 50 to 60K per business until your business is doing above 6 million a year. That's 10%.
Well, the hiring was.
Yeah, I mean, that's pretty huge. So, just to again, prop that a little bit. I do completely in here in calls for higher percentages and this stuff is something that we've talked to CDs about, but this does represent a pretty sizable investment by these businesses.
Well, I want to be
into the
clear, we're not
process.
asking for higher shows. I'm just kind of saying that this is indicative. How successful or unsuccessful getting equity applicants. I mean, we can get the diligence and so many of them. So I'm just saying that number is indicative of that. I wouldn't ask them.
And-
I'm just saying ask them.
Yeah, that number needs to be. Maybe there's a way to think of how to participate or incentivize retailers in general to shelf space for. Like, I don't know, things like, I don't know, some type of like, I'm just making something up, like, a rebate at the end of the year that X percentage of how much, right? I don't know, but we should try to further incentivize.
Okay. I just said that's good.
I was happy to do the
For
work.
anyone sitting at level
Which I should be.
Yeah, and just last thing I would say is procedurally, just obviously we can make recommendations on those kinds of things as a committee. These things are self-imposed. So there would need to be some kind of a legislative change in order to impose any specific requirements on NC businesses. It's just.
I think as a industry regulated,
But I think this conversation is establishing where we're seeing a shift. Equity grants in particular.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, and you said to go to public comment?
Yes.
Sir. Moment here. Okay. For any members of the public attending in person, please line up behind this table to provide public comment. For our remote viewers, please note that you have two options to provide public comment at this time. The first option is to call in by phone. If you would like to use this option, please dial 1-415-655-0001, followed by this access code, 2488-735-7187. And then press *3 when prompted to do so. You may be muted if there are others in the queue before you. If so, please wait until you hear a prompt on your phone to unmute. This is your indication that it is your turn to comment. Please press *6 to unmute and begin your public comment. Once your time has elapsed, you will be muted again. Option 2, you can submit your comments by chat. The chat box is open and I will read your comments as they come in. Step up to the podium. Please feel free to state your name for the record and begin your public comment.
Graham Goodwin, running Mary Democratic Club. Building on a little bit what we were talking about, noticed in the passion for consuming cannabis. And as Ali did with the math, 25 divided by 100 is like 4K a year. I would love to see, and I'm going to fill it out for Jerry here because we've cannabis and they've been very generous with us. I don't know what the number is, like more than 4K a year. So I would encourage anybody that's listening, whether you're Article 16 or 30, please part of one of the programs is the number of cells there, because I think it's tremendous. In the end, someday, that was always part of it. And so I would encourage that number, that 100 grand to go up. And I know that's one of the other things cannabis and articles. Thank you for doing it.
Thank you for your public comment. I see no indication that anyone online would like to make a public comment. Sounds good. We'll now for viewers, and we'll be back in about 10 minutes.
All right. Back.
Yes, so the brief update, item number 8 was agendized to be discussed on ordinance 23988. This was an ordinance that was introduced by Supervisor Stephanie, and it proposed to expand the 600-foot buffer rule and to include daycare centers, which is not currently included in the definition. There's more to it than that, but that was the general thrust of the ordinance. This item is been taken off the agenda because the ordinance filing has been changed on Legistar. It's been switched to filed status. I believe Nikesh mentioned this earlier. Really, all that means is that it's kind of sitting on the back burner. It's off in the ether sphere of the Board of Supervisors. They could pull it back in to be discussed again at some future point, but for now, there is no indication that it will be any kind of an active piece of legislation that they will pursue. So that was why Chairperson Jamalian suggested taking it off the agenda for today. And then just while I'm speaking, as a brief introduction to agenda item number 9, this is ordinance number 231-223. This was introduced by Supervisor Chan. This aimed to amend the planning code to require conditional use authorization for establishing parcel delivery service uses. The ordinance would have also prohibited parcel delivery service as an accessory use, and it would have revised the zoning control tables to reflect these changes. One minor update on this ordinance is that this ordinance went to a vote on second reading at the Board of Supervisors meetings this previous Tuesday. I believe it passed on second reading. And on that passage, further back in the process, right, without going way into the weeds, there was an addition to the ordinance which allowed for accessory use for cannabis delivery. So I know we're really in the weeds here, and I'm happy to explain a little bit more about how these things work. And we also have Matthew Chandler from the planning department, who's a great resource about how this would affect businesses. But essentially, we've got a carve-out incorporated into the ordinance to exempt accessory use cannabis delivery from prohibition. This is a lot of city speak. So I am going to pull Matthew into this conversation, but in essence, my understanding of it is that, right, you have your main use, your principal use, you have an accessory use that you can tie to the parcel. You can get an accessory use for cannabis delivery. So an example would be a storefront retailer, they get an accessory use to also make deliveries. That is still possible. However, if delivery is going to be your principal use, like a delivery-only business, those businesses will now need to get a conditional use authorization for that use. So there's more details to that. I'm going to pass it over to Matthew to take it up from there. And then feel free to direct questions to just whomever and we'll try to attack.
Explain this. When you say accessory use, this got mentioned. Then that is considered accessory use. The legislation. And you have to
Well, it would have removed, so slight nuances here is just that they would have removed parcel delivery as an accessory use option for every business. What that would have caused, at least referring to our code, is that you could no longer apply for and open a new storefront retail business that would also have a delivery component, because the way our code 16 is written is there is only a storefront retail permit and a delivery only retail permit. And the delivery has always been an accessory use to the storefront retail as far as cannabis is concerned. So if they prohibited all accessory use parcel delivery, we would no longer be able to go through that process at all. Hence why the need for this carve out. And then even going a little bit deeper, part of the reason that we need to do the carve out is because in the city definition of parcel delivery service, cannabis was explicitly mentioned. And so because this ordinance is changing the parcel delivery service definition, they then needed to carve out cannabis because it's explicitly written into the parcel delivery service definition like that. Is that broadly correct?
that sounds right. Maybe the difference is
And we would have needed a legislative change to Article 16 because we do not have a primary use delivery permit that folks can get except a delivery only permit, which means you would be able to run a storefront retail business and a delivery business.
If I can jump in, this all stems from Waymo saying they were going to start taking packages and groceries from Safeway and sending driverless cars to deliver them. So the Teamsters got wind of This is going after members in San Francisco. That's why this all started. And this kind of got just kind of common process of this. But yeah, the whole thing comes from autonomous vehicles attempting to steal more jobs in the city. That's how we got to here. Cannabis just kind of got into that process.
I think the karma.
Yeah.
Back in your once you realize.
Yeah.
Yes.
You have a Teamster on the.
Yes.
I joked in and said.
I think it's important to note that it's application not affected by this.
I actually. Yeah, so. There was a time. I am. So like, I don't know. But generally. Susan. Like, I think that's successful. If anyone, if you were seeking as your primary activity, then if you didn't I think because the legislation hasn't necessarily had a lot of then it's quite possible that there could be some recommendation. Yeah, so if you're seeking let's say and you are and well, yeah, so I think the main thing is that you have not seen anyone with some what's that going to
Is that
accessory market? The ranges is so cannabis.
So
So just important. Typically it's something. Yes. I think prior to this going.
and I think we can be fairly certain in saying that this will not be like an ex post facto situation where like a fully permanent delivery only business that received planning authorization and all those kinds of things that's been in operation already, they're not gonna have to go back and do some kind of new process. No, they'll be fine. It seems that the key indicator here will be if it's gone through the planning process yet. That seems to be it, but it's hard to say.
and I assume there's not that many different applications subject to this.
We can get that. I think the short.
And just for full awareness, I believe not only was this voted on in second reading already, so I think we're in the committee period right now. Something like that, but not only that, it was backdated. So I believe they have this ordinance going into effect on March 5th. So No, it's okay. Yeah, so I believe that's because that was when they had like an interim ordinance that had a lot of these similar provisions that was expiring, and so they wanted to.
I mean, we could take a look at it. We did some analysis. But again, it has been personally. So we're now looking at
And obviously,
yeah, I mean, the key distinction is overall. Primary use is when you something use as the incident so overall, and then the idea there, 5,000 criteria, and then there's also
Yeah, no, no, thank you. Yes.
This doesn't really.
not a significant.
Yeah, so it's hard to say. It will be a bit of a, it sounds like a cop out, but it will be a bit of a case by case basis, because if you are a distributor who's also doing deliveries and you're operating out of a really large warehouse, you may end up facing a different CU process than you traditionally would have prior to this ordinance. But I think what Matthew is pointing to as well is there's just a little bit of a lack of clarity on how the ordinance is going to be applied exactly by the planning department, because it's so recent.
Yeah, the main thing. It's something I need clarity on. Very familiar with this. Or typically. And then it's adopted and put it in. I think it's we just decided here probably 20 hours. Over the course of- So, if it doesn't get clear, it could be a long.
It's as clear as we can get it. Sure thing. For any members of the public attending in person, please line up behind this table to provide public comment. For our remote viewers, please make you have two options to provide public comment at this time. The first option is to call in by phone. If you would like to use this option, please dial 1-415-655-0001, followed by this access code 2488-735-7187. Then press *3 when you're prompted to do so. You may be muted if there are others in the queue before you. If so, please wait until you hear a prompt on your phone to unmute. This is your indication that it's your turn to comment. Please press *6 to unmute and begin your public comment. Once your time has elapsed, you will be muted again. Option 2, you can submit your comments by chat. The chat box is now open, and I will read comments as they come in. Looks like we have an individual in person who would like to make a comment. Please feel free to step up to the podium, state your name for the record if you like, and begin your public comment when ready.
Graham Goodwin, Director. I want to comment on the ordinance for the You're meeting human staff, supervisor Stephanie, very vigorously. And I think it's a good indication that when in a coordinated way make our opinion heard, do something very important. One of the points I'd like to make is that start understanding Supervisor Stephanie is going to submit a ordinance that's going to, instead of what she originally did, it's going to request planning department to do a study in environment. And I personally think it's a good thing, because if we can get a city done report on the environment, what they're going to find, that it's actually important. And I think it would be an important document that to be able to reference. So I'd like just to highlight the fact we're happy that Supervisor Stephanie is moving on. Kudos, contact her and others demanding this study because show that the environment of cannabis retail and I asked them specifically if they had any negative report, anything that might prompt it to make it. So this is not because something.
Thank you. Thank you very much for your public comments. Chairperson, I see no one else in person who'd like to comment. I see no indication from anyone online. Oh, you make a big difference.
Okay, never mind. Well,
Proposed future agenda, now you can bring.
There we go.
Now, whatever you like. Yeah, whatever you
Let
like.
me go first. Just on what Brandon was saying, I think the office is also, or Stephanie's office is also taking recommendations on what they're going to start on. So I'm going to send a letter to to bring in taxes to the city, safety, improvements in safety. We're able to give those recommendations that shape what.
So would you like to add a point?
So the COC would like to send a set of recommendations to.
So instead of reporting with this?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
I think state progress on the state side where it makes sense.
Do we have any other recommendations from committee members on items proposed?
I think we. It is. License.
That sounds like shit.
Yeah, I just have a question. I kind of along the lines of or putting on the agenda in terms of giving recommendations to Supervisor Stephanie. Just like a 15-minute presentation office about like what does it look like? What does the process look like from the we actually vote on a recommendation to how does it get from here, right, to the desk of the supervisor, you know, who does it touch, who has what deadline in front of them, and how, is that possible?
Yeah, I think it's possible. I mean, I think the long and short of it at this exact moment is just that the committee makes the recommendation, a member of the committee drafts a recommendation or drafts language for that recommendation, or the language is hashed out during the committee session. We can obviously annotate it and then, send it to the chairperson for approval, let's say. And then that language would just be sent usually by the chairperson directly to the supervisor's office as the representative of the committee.
If it's.
After that is. Right. It's. If there is, I'm asking if there's.
Yeah, and we, a slight distinction here would be if there's a recommendation that y'all make and it's not like a specific text recommendation, then we will often send that information off to the board of supervisors on your behalf. And if it's like a letter that the committee's writing, for example, then it's usually written by committee members and they send it directly.
Because it is something considered for some future. It's extended.
It's possible it's like December 31st, 2024.
I didn't think so.
Yeah, I need to look at it.
And it's pointing.
It could be December 31st, 2024. It could also be like March of 2025. That is I'll look into that. We still have 2 seats open too, by the way. If anybody wants to push people, I think those seats have specific requirements, but I can disseminate that information to the committee members in case there's people that know that those requirements. You do need to take public comment on this agenda. Okay. For any members of the public attending in person, please line up behind this table to provide public comment. For our remote viewers, please note that you have 2 options to provide public comment at this time. The first option is to call in by phone. If you would like to use this option, please dial 1-415-655-0001, followed by this access code 2488-735-7187, and then press *3 when prompted to do so. You may be muted if there are others in the queue before you. If so, please wait until you hear a prompt on your phone to unmute. This is your indication that it is your turn to comment. Please then press *6 to unmute and begin your public comment. Once your time has elapsed, you will be muted again. Option 2, you can submit your comments by chat. The chat box is now open and I will read your comments as they come in. If you would like to step to the podium, please state your name for the record if you'd like.
Brandon Goodwin, here to Brian, very good. Get my money worth. I just wanted to let some change in because it hit me the recommendation for the agenda item. You know, how normal they should have a lobbying thing at the big town. I wonder if we could be organized some city where we took some of these recommendations and we went, as an organized thing to city hall and met with and organized maybe a little seminar. So I'd love to see that as an agenda item. I think Shane's done a very good, nice to talk among ourselves, but the action is putting it in. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your comments. I see no one else in person who would like to comment, and I see no one online who would like to.
Thank you. Thank you.